In 1997, Apple was just weeks away from collapse. The company that once promised to change the future was running out of cash. Its products were confusing, its leadership was fractured, and its competitors were winning. Most people believed Apple was finished. But what happened next became one of the greatest comebacks in business history, because Apple didn't just survive, it reshaped the modern world. And somehow, it all started in a small garage with two young men, zero outside funding, and an almost irrational belief in the future. This is not just the story of a company. It's a story about obsession, control, failure, reinvention, and the dangerous power of believing you can change the world before anyone else does. Silicon Valley in the 1970s wasn't the global tech empire we know today. It was messy, experimental, and uncertain. A strange mix of engineers, hackers, dreamers, and outsiders. And at the center of it were two completely different people: Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Wozniak was the technical genius, the kind of engineer who could build computers for fun, just to see if he could. Jobs was different. He wasn't the best engineer in the room. He was something more dangerous, a visionary, obsessed with simplicity, design, and perfection. He believed technology shouldn't feel cold or intimidating. It should feel human. The two met through mutual friend, Bill Fernandez, and in 1975 they joined the Homebrew Computer Club. Most people there saw computers as hobby machines. Jobs saw something else entirely: a revolution. Their first product was called the Apple I. And honestly, it didn't look impressive. No monitor, no keyboard, no case, just a bare motherboard. But underneath the wires and circuitry was an idea powerful enough to change history. To fund the project, Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Wozniak sold his HP calculator. No investors, no safety net, just commitment. Then came the product that changed everything: the Apple II. Computers could belong to ordinary people, not just governments, not just corporations. Everyone. Unlike most computers of its time, it wasn't built only for engineers. It was colorful, friendly, and ready to use. And then came VisiCalc, the world's first spreadsheet software. That moment changed everything. Businesses suddenly realized computers weren't optional anymore. They were essential. Apple didn't just sell a machine, it helped create the entire personal computer industry. And by 1980, Apple went public, creating more millionaires than almost any company before it. The dream was becoming real. But success creates pressure, and pressure changes people. As Apple grew, so did the tension inside the company. Jobs believed Apple should control everything: the hardware, the software, the experience, but investors wanted stability, growth, and predictability. So Apple hired a new CEO, John Sculley. At the time, Sculley was one of the biggest executives in America. And Jobs convinced him to join Apple with one legendary question: do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or come with me and change the world? Sculley said yes, and that decision would nearly destroy Apple. In 1984, Apple introduced the Macintosh. It wasn't the fastest computer, but it felt revolutionary. For the first time, you didn't need to memorize commands. You could click, see, and create. Technology suddenly felt personal, human. Apple even launched it with one of the most iconic advertisements ever made: the 1984 Super Bowl commercial directed by Ridley Scott. It wasn't just marketing, it was a declaration of war against conformity. But while the public saw innovation, inside Apple, a civil war had already begun. Jobs and Sculley began fighting for control of Apple. Vision versus stability, creativity versus corporate structure. And in 1985, Steve Jobs lost. The founder of Apple was pushed out of the company he built. Imagine dedicating your life to building the future, only to be told you no longer belong in it. Apple survived, but something inside the company disappeared. Its soul. The years after Jobs were brutal. Apple released product after product without direction. Too many ideas, too many experiments, but no clear identity. Meanwhile, Microsoft Corporation dominated the world with Windows, and Apple kept shrinking. By the mid-90s, the company was dangerously close to bankruptcy. At one point, Apple reportedly had only weeks of cash remaining. The company that once defined innovation was becoming irrelevant. Then came the turning point. Apple acquired Next, the company Steve Jobs had built after leaving Apple. And suddenly, Jobs was back. What he did next shocked almost everyone. He cut nearly 70% of Apple's products because Jobs understood something most companies forget. Focus creates power. Apple stopped trying to do everything and started trying to do a few things exceptionally well. Then came the campaign that redefined the company. Think different. It celebrated outsiders, rebels, artists, dreamers, people who refused to accept the world as it was. It wasn't advertising. It was Apple's identity. Then Apple released the iMac G3. Bright colors, transparent plastic, friendly design, and suddenly, technology no longer felt intimidating. Jobs understood something revolutionary. People don't just buy products. They buy how those products make them feel. Apple wasn't catching up anymore. It was leading. Then came one of Apple's smartest moves ever. The iPod. But the real innovation wasn't the device itself. It was the ecosystem around it. iTunes, hardware, and software, all working together seamlessly. Apple no longer sold individual products. It sold an experience, and once people entered Apple's ecosystem, they rarely wanted to leave. Then came 2007, the moment that changed everything. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage and introduced the iPhone. A phone, an iPod, an internet device, all in one. It wasn't the first smartphone, but it was the first one that truly made sense. And within a few years, the iPhone transformed. Communication, business, entertainment, photography, social interaction, even human attention itself. Apple didn't just disrupt an industry, it reshaped modern life. In 2011, Steve Jobs passed away, and many believed Apple's best days were over. Leadership passed to Tim Cook, a completely different kind of leader, less theatrical, more operational. But under Cook, Apple scaled to levels almost unimaginable. Services exploded, wearables dominated. Apple Silicon transformed the Mac lineup. And Apple became one of the most valuable companies ever created. Today, Apple is more than a technology company. It's a platform, a brand, and a cultural force. And now, the industry is changing once again. Artificial intelligence is reshaping the future of technology. Companies like NVIDIA Corporation have surged to extraordinary heights, powering the AI revolution. The battle for the future is evolving. Apple built the modern consumer ecosystem. Now the next question is, who will shape the intelligence era? Apple's story isn't clean. It's messy, filled with ego, failure, conflict, and obsession. But maybe that's exactly why it matters, because greatness rarely looks stable while it's being built. And here's the part that feels almost impossible to believe. If you had invested just $1,000 in Apple at its IPO on December 12, 1980, and simply held on through the chaos, through the near bankruptcy, through the crashes, the fear, the doubt, that investment would be worth roughly $3 million today, a return of nearly 3,000 times your original investment. For over 4 decades, Apple compounded wealth at roughly 19 to 20% per year after year, decade after decade, and making it one of the greatest wealth creation stories in the history of the stock market. And the craziest part? In the beginning, almost nobody could see it. Because in 1980, Apple wasn't a trillion-dollar empire. It was just a risky computer company built by a few obsessive outsiders in a garage. But that's the thing about belief. The world usually laughs at it before it changes everything. From a garage in Los Altos to reshaping entire industries, Apple didn't just build products, it built belief. And that belief changed the world.